Hello and welcome. My name is Robbie Nock, and I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship and Professional Practice at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California. Thank you for joining us on Zoom today, and amazing to see all of you joining from all over the United States and the world. We are so glad to have you here, and this is one of the remarkable things about online education in 2020 is just how global and just how distributed it is. Mm-hmm. So our session today is going to focus on new pathways for creative entrepreneurs, and we're very lucky to have Alice, Loy, and Lena Ramfelt from Creative Startups. Overall, our goal today is to help you understand how to maximize the value you bring as a creative to the world of startups, venture capital, and the global creative economy. We will focus on ways to frame your value for those that might not understand creative practice, where to look for financial support, and how to build a network of collaborators and partners to realize your creative vision. Before we get started, I'd like to just reiterate our context and share with you the mission and vision behind these webinars. As many of you know, these are part of our Bold series at Art Center, which is our platform for creative entrepreneurs. Thank you to our co-chairs Yvette Roman and Robert Nashak for their ongoing support. Hopefully they join today. Bold's mission is threefold: to educate artists and designers with the business and entrepreneurship skills needed to succeed professionally, to enable artists and designers to articulate and convey the unique value they bring to businesses and clients. But more than anything else, Bold is here to help you start something new, to share the strategy, tools, and network to create and grow that which does not yet exist. So that's Bold, and now to introduce our two incredible guests. I was lucky to meet Alice and Lena last year, and over the course of a few conversations, we realized that we share a similar conviction that artists and designers make excellent startup founders, that creative entrepreneurs can propel innovation, and that the unique skills our community brings require a new formula for startup development and funding. Dr. Alice Loy co-founded Creative Startups in 2007. She has over 20 years experience working with entrepreneurs in the creative industries. She built the Creative Startups Accelerator with a vision for catalyzing high growth company formation, and now operates programs on 4 continents, serving 150 companies each year with over 100 global mentors, an international network of investors, and over 260 alumni companies thus far. In 2018, Alice co-authored Creative Economy Entrepreneurs: From Startup to Success. She holds an MBA and a PhD in entrepreneurship and marketing, and lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico with her family. Along with Alice, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Lena Ramfelt. She is recognized globally as a leading entrepreneurship educator and an advisor to early stage accelerating companies. After completing her postdoctoral work in entrepreneurship ecosystems at Stanford, Lena taught entrepreneurship, innovation, and marketing for 12 years at Stanford School of Engineering. Today, Lena develops curriculum and text used the world over. She works with creative, high-tech, and social entrepreneurs, and is the lead author of 3 Gear Up books, the most recent being Gear Up: Test Your Business Model Potential and Plan Your Path to Success. As lead faculty with Creative Startups since 2014, Lena authors and tests and frequently participates in the labs and accelerator programs. So welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here. And thank you for listening to my formal remarks. To begin with, I think it's important to really define what we mean by creative entrepreneurship. And Alice, I'd love for you to share your definition of what a creative entrepreneur is.
Sure. So I utilize, and Creative Startups and Da Vinci Ventures, our fund, we all utilize the most commonly used definition of entrepreneurship, which is: entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently under control. And I love that definition because my background is in social justice, economic justice, and social movements. And I was drawn to entrepreneurship because entrepreneurs are the people who lead those movements. And when you unpack entrepreneurship by that definition, we're talking about people who see an opportunity and go for it. And they ignore the naysayers, and they ignore that they don't have money and that they can't quite figure it out yet. And they go for it. And those are remarkable people. Those are special people. And when you add creative to that, we're talking about people in the creative industries. So it could be an artist, or it could be the founder of a new museum, a festival, an AI company, a wearables company that helps gauge audience experience at a concert. So people in the creative industries who are going for an opportunity, regardless of whether or not they have everything they need to get there.
And to continue in that vein, what were you thinking about in 2007 when you launched Creative Startups? I know back then it was not a common term, not a common area of practice. How did it all come to be?
So I'm going to share a little secret that none of these 80 people are supposed to share. I'm really bad at branding. So the real name of our organization, if you look at our documents, is the Global Center for Cultural Entrepreneurship. Two problems with that. One, nobody can spell entrepreneurship. So I spent 3 years spelling it for people. Not a good idea. Two, it has changed from cultural to creative. We've been doing this work now for almost 15 years. So we really pioneered the creative economy and resources for creative entrepreneurs. And when we started this work, I founded the organization with a gentleman named Tom Augustin. Tom and I saw that there were cultural entrepreneurs who were being overlooked or dismissed out of hand. And in New Mexico, where we have just an extraordinary kaleidoscope of cultures, that's probably our best asset. Instead of taking that asset and saying, wow, who could we be in the global economy? Being ourselves, bringing who we are and what we have, but innovating and using new technologies. There was nobody doing that work. So then we started to look further afield. We approached UN. The first grant that we got was from the UN. And it was clear that there was a need for resources for entrepreneurs who are building creative businesses out of culture or a sense of place, tradition, heritage, but they're innovating. So that's the work that we've been pioneering. And we have been blessed by a global sea change, and now people everywhere. I saw Qatar. We have friends in Qatar. We've done work in Peru. We've done work in Malaysia. We've done work in, we just wrapped up a program in Portugal. All around the world, people are saying, we want to tell our stories. We want to invent new technologies. We want to connect with people everywhere and contribute to this kaleidoscope of humanity. So we've been really fortunate in the timing.
I wish I'd met you in 2007.
Well, I had a very harried look because I had 2 toddlers and I was finishing a PhD. And so most of the time I felt like a 70s mom. I was like smoking and drinking and just trying to not lose my mind. And now I'm back there because now I have 2 teenagers and it's COVID. So
it all goes in a circle.
It all goes in a circle. So, and then we met Lena, and I would say that meeting Lena was for me personally and for the organization a way to turn the corner that we could not have done without her not only global sense of what is possible for entrepreneurs, but her extraordinary ability to bring them into their full potential. That's a gift that only Lena Ramfelt has, as far as I can see.
That's a perfect bridge.
I just said, I'm so happy it's recorded. So, you know, it will be there forever, Alice. Sorry.
No, it's a perfect bridge to my next question for you, for Lena. And it's really based on your experience working with a different community of entrepreneurs in the engineering ecosystem. What is the major difference that creative entrepreneurs bring to the process that you've noticed in maybe shifting some of your work from the engineering community into the creative community?
I would say that the biggest difference is that creatives identify themselves as creatives, while as during those wonderful years in Silicon Valley, I mean, they even if they were not really entrepreneurs yet, they identify themselves as high-tech, up-and-coming entrepreneurs. That's a huge difference. Yes, and I also think that, and with that comes other things also, of course, because when Alice and I work with creative entrepreneurs, they have a tendency, even when we introduce to them that you are really an entrepreneur or you can build a business out of this, they tend to they stick to thinking in projects, therefore in a way limiting the potential of scaling their businesses. So those are two huge differences.
That identity as a creative first is something that I think we are proud of in the creative community. And yet when you reach the edge of the creative space and you begin to connect to the business side of any project, company, pathway, some of those assumptions about creatives can be limiting. So I guess I'm interested in both of your opinions on how creative entrepreneurs can frame themselves in a way that creates and generates support from partners who might not understand anything about art and design or creative practice, who might be coming from different backgrounds. How do they translate their skills and abilities into a world of people that might not know that?
One of the things that we we think creatives understand is that business is just a set of tools and vocabulary. I share the story that when I went to business school, I was terrified. I thought I would be surrounded by, and I went to business school because I felt like I had been spending 10 years fighting a system. And if I didn't understand the system, I couldn't really fight it. So I decided to sort of, embed myself in the system and see if I could deconstruct it from the inside out. But I was terrified. I thought, coming out of, I had worked with migrant farm workers doing social justice work, homeless teenagers who were pregnant. It was a different world for me. And I was really disappointed by the lack of curiosity or intellectual drive or ability to invert and subvert systems to make change happen. There was none of that thinking going on. However, there was one thing that I learned at business school that is very useful for life, which is if you are organizing a group of people around a single bottom line, around one outcome, it's really easy. And if you frankly intimidate them with the loss of livelihood, which is what we live in a system that's what's going on, right? It's really easy to get them to behave and to follow a certain line. The MBA world is not built for innovation. It is not built for subverting systems. It is not built for disruption. It is not built for innovation. And yet, accounting is really basic and helps you organize your money and know when you're going to run out, and you need to know that. So what we always help broker is this understanding and familiarity and comfort with the business world, because it's just vocabulary and some tools. And then we say, okay, now reject all of the values that are pervasive in the corporate structures. Keep your values and put to work those tools, because cash flow is cash flow. And the problems with how people use cash flow are that they're making sure cash flows to a very few number of people. Well, you don't have to build your business with those values. Your business can be built with the values of your community and the people you want to lift up and work with and give voice to. But you can still use the tools from business. So I think what we try to do is encourage creatives to go and learn. Business speak is easy. It's really easy. And the creatives we work with are mind-blowing in terms of their ability to innovate and think about disruption and feel comfortable with that pathway. And that is the most powerful position to be in business, because people who can't innovate these days, they can't build a company. So creatives are uniquely adapted to this space. Yeah.
That really draws two incredibly important ideas out, which is the ability to imagine an alternative that might not yet exist.
Yeah.
And then the ability to, even before any art or design or creative tool is used, to describe that alternative, to really bring forth a very, very clear vision. And I think something that we've identified at Art Center is very similar to your assessment of the toolkit, that the business toolkit and the startup toolkit is just that. It's a set of tools that are knowable, that you can apply to your creative vision, or to a community's creative vision, or to a network's creative vision. So Lena, how this goes to the very tactical, on the ground level. How do you start, as somebody that's interested in pushing into this world of business and startups as a creative, how do you start to develop the language and toolkit understanding? Where should you look? What are some of those big thematic areas that you need to start to pay attention to and become more fluent in?
So I would say that don't even start to try to be fluent in business, because I usually tell people, and it's half provocatively I do it, but half of it is true, is that I think it's too easy to write the business plan. You download a template, you Google it, you download the template, and then you fill out the fields where you're strong and try as much as you can to avoid the fields where you are weak. So when I get...
I've never done that.
No, of course, but you're an exception in so many ways.
That's right.
So, I mean, if I, and I'm sure I am insulting a lot of people here, I will see that in the chat, but if I get a business plan from someone with an MBA, there's a lot of Excel spreadsheets in it, you know, and if I get it from an engineer, oh my gosh, there's so much about the coding, the programming, or, and pretty much that doesn't have anything with what you need to do, because there are 3 things that you need to do, and you don't need to speak business for that. And that is there, and I use my own vocabulary, is there a pain that someone, hopefully a large enough group of people, are prepared to having that pain killed by paying money? And do I have the right painkiller? It doesn't, you don't have to have business cards for that. You don't have to have an office. You don't have really to understand how Excel works yet. You will eventually. But to work with that pain, customers, and painkiller. And the only way of doing that is to leave the building, leave the university, leave Art Center, the comfortable space of Art Center, and go out there and be around and among people. And that is really the first step. And you should do that even before you have downloaded a business plan. And that's a little bit back to what Alice said, is that our job is, whenever we meet a creative entrepreneur, wherever in the world, we try to make it as simple as possible to understand. Here are the concepts, here are the tools, here are a few examples that we can all relate to. Because we don't want to show off. There is no point. We're not trying to make this complicated, because the complicated part, the sometimes frustrating part, is when the entrepreneurs have to, for lack of a better word, when they have to internalize it and do something with that. What's the pain? Who are the customers? And what's my painkiller? That's how we start. And we spend an awful lot of time with the entrepreneurs on kind of kicking them out of the building over and over and over again until there is an alignment among the three. And then we take them to the next step and talk more about execution.
So that is fascinating. And I think the tension that exists in a creative practice is that there is an idea of always making something new, always showing something to the world that is unique, personal, totally unprecedented, and that there's a goal in that, there's a drive in that amongst the creative community. And when you flip that around and focus on problems, sometimes that isn't such an intuitive process. So Alice, how have you seen that shift in mindset play out in some of the companies that you've worked with? The mindset of shifting from looking outward and imagining something new that is totally unprecedented to looking more closely to what might be the problems that people are having that can actually be solved.
What a great question. That question, Robbie, has taken on new meaning for me in this period where I'm going to show my colors a little bit here, but I think we are in a dire situation in the United States of America and globally, but this is where I live. And so this is where I feel like I can comment on the people who created the problems that we are mired in now are not the people who will solve them. We have got to unleash a new generation of solution-oriented people who are empathetic and connected and passionate about, yes, heritage and innovation and diversity of place and people and story. I am going to say something that might offend some people. If you are a creative and you are just thinking about how you can make your art practice better, you are missing an opportunity to right the ship. And there are millions of people who need you to step up. And I would say that it borders on selfishness to use your talents only for your personal expression. Our problems are too big now. We have got to harness our energy as creative people, as people who come first from empathy and love. And we have got to put that to solving big problems that matter to a lot of people. And that would be my call to the creative community, is give us your gifts. We need them desperately. And I think what we see in the entrepreneurs who are extraordinarily successful is that they channel all of that energy to a problem, and through that, they build a system that's creative. So it's not a product that's creative, although it has some creativity, obviously, right? If you're a filmmaker who's got successful films time after time, you've built a system that's creative, but you also have creative product. But the ones who we see as really game-changing are building systems that are, each element of the system has creativity, whether it's how employees are compensated, who gets to be on the board, what markets and how they talk about them and go after them, who gets to create product, how is the product sourced, what about the people who are making the product, what are their livelihoods looking like, right? I mean, a business is complicated. It's got a lot of different pieces. And if you can be creative in each one of those, and yes, come up with creative products, but you're building a system, not only is that a lifelong challenge for any ingenuous person, but you are going after problems that really matter. And that is what we desperately need. So I'm now off my soapbox. But.
Well, but it's not a soapbox. In fact, I think it's an approach to the way that the creative world has evolved, and our role has changed over the years. Mm-hmm. In 1900, art and design education was not core to colleges and universities across the world. And the growth of this field, the growth of this area, both in education and in commerce and in all other facets of life, has led to a kind of a tipping point where we no longer can limit ourselves to the mediums of the past. And one of the things that I think we're very passionate about at Art Center is pushing the boundary of the medium. What can actually be imagined, designed, created, and refined?
Yeah.
And where does that apply?
Yeah.
Right? Systems are the key word here. So Lena, obviously the engineering world, you know so much about systems. That's the approach, that's the methodology. How does the systems approach start at the ground up? Where do you need to look? And this goes back to, again, the kinds of tactical approaches that our audience can take.
So you're asking me where it starts?
How to think about rather than designing or creating an object, a product, an app. Those are all the external facing components of something else that's happening. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes creatives are part of a set of connected processes that lead to a product or a film or a website or a brand. But really, how do you start to think more about what's going on in the systems that lead to those outcomes, that lead to the next phone, the next the next game, the next wearable?
So I live in Sweden, and we have a different higher ed system than that you have. But my two sons have both gone to colleges in the US. And one thing that we do not have in Europe as much as you do have is courses, general ed courses. And I find it really fascinating. Right now, my son is at UCSC. The gen ed courses that he is taken, and him as hoping for a major in engineering, how those courses, sometimes he doesn't really get it yet, but how those courses contextualize what he can do. Like he was taking a course in environmental course at UCSC, and how he could, based on that, and how his professors were kind of pushing him on what is it that you as a potential engineer can do about the challenges that you have learned about in the engineering courses. And I think that is something that we are not globally, we are not using entrepreneurship as a tool, bringing it in to courses into curriculum and having that as a thread almost in physics, in home economics. So that instead of saying, okay, I'm going to take a product design course, what should I create? You know, what's the product that I want to make? Mm-hmm. You already have an idea when you go into that kind of course, and that is why I don't teach as much nowadays anymore, because Robbie, I don't want to be rude in any way, but I don't like the courses that I have been part of designing where we say, okay, you students, it's time for you to write the business plan. So find something, you know, go on campus and just find something that is missing and create a solution for it. Because in that, in what we are communicating is that it's the solution that is the main thing, which is not. It's the pain. Identifying the pain, you know, and I work so much with social entrepreneurs. So you know, identify a pain, and maybe there will never be customers who pay for it, but there will be someone else that will pay for it. Yeah. But it's the pain that is the most important thing.
I think building on that, Lena, while you were telling that story, I thought about, you know, humanity invented wheels for suitcases in like 1982. Look around and there are problems all around. There's literal pain. For those of us who are old enough, we remember lugging enormous suitcases without wheels in 1982, right? I mean, there are problems and pains everywhere. And I think Lena's unusually adept at getting entrepreneurs to stop obsessing with what you want to do and start obsessing with what people need. And some entrepreneurs are able to think globally about that. And really disruptive entrepreneurs are even able to see things that people need that we don't yet know we need. And those innovators are truly exceptional, right? We didn't know that we needed an iPhone with a camera, but Steve Jobs was the kind of person who saw. Now, was that solving a need that will lift millions of people out of poverty or get them clean drinking water? No. So we need to focus our energies on problems that really create solutions for people, so that we're all living a better standard of living. But yeah, look around you and you will be shocked at how many needs you start to go, wow, we're all, you know, once you think about the wheels on luggage thing, you start to think, okay, so 30% of Americans say they won't take a vaccination for COVID if one is invented. That's a huge problem. Let's solve that, right? There are problems like that that are huge that people are just going, well, I don't know what to do about that.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think that this question about the solution first approach is one that really limits people. And at Art Center and in our community of students and alumni that have been very successful in the business realm, they clearly demonstrate that it is about the problems and it is about evolving solutions. So not being totally stuck on one way of doing something. Yeah. But I think Lena, to go back to that, why is that sort of problem solution balance so tricky for people? What are some of the ways that they can not get stuck on their first solution or second solution and realize that it's a life of creating solutions, that they're always evolving, that a business is about a course of solutions over time, and if they don't exist any longer.
So I maybe two different ways of answering that question. One is to realize that there will never be a final solution that they will offer, to constantly be out there in interaction with the customers and other stakeholders involved, and really enjoy being out there, understanding what else could I do, or which should happen more often, what can I remove from my solution? What is it that people are not using in what I'm offering? And one, I use this a lot with our creative entrepreneurs, is that when I lived in Palo Alto, there was an Apple store in Stanford shopping center. I'm sure it still is. And it wasn't that unusual that Steve Jobs was in the store. And he was not there for selling. He didn't, you know, of course, everyone was paying attention to that he was there, but he was just kind of cruising around, listening to the conversation, talking to his employees. I'm sure that he was looking at what bags are people bringing in with them into the store. How long are they here? Do they walk from right to left or from left to right? What do you see? Things like that. So truly enjoy some people talk about the customer discovery process. I mean, this is just a fancy word for saying spend time with your potential customers to learn more. The other thing is that when I am asked, you know, kind of give 3 advice or something, one of the advice that I usually give is that to entrepreneurs is, don't fall in love with your painkiller. Stay in love with killing the pain of your customers. And that is not the same thing. Because if you have fallen in love with your painkiller, you might be oblivious to where your customers are going. You might be oblivious to how you could price what you're offering. So you are not realizing the potential of your business because you're so stuck with the solution.
And it doesn't have to be a mystery, right? This is such a critical factor, that it is knowable that the struggles and challenges that people have with everything that exists is something that we have the tools and processes to really know. And that knowledge is critical. So I guess and we're about 40 minutes in here. So just for our attendees, we're going to do another 20 minutes of our questions that we have defined already. And then we're going to jump into the Q&A. So I see a few questions have already gone in there, and we'll get to those in about 15, 20 minutes. To shift gears a little bit, and I think this is another hugely important part of creative entrepreneurship, is collaboration and team building. And really knowing the limits of your own knowledge, abilities, and practices, and how to bring like-minded or maybe even alternatively minded collaborators to your team, and to strengthen your ability to focus on those pain points. Alice, of the many companies that you've worked with, what are some of those collaborative approaches that work best? Really at the sort of early stage, how do you reach out to that developer or MBA student that you want to bring into your team and partner with, or that you might think has a beneficial relationship to what you might be trying to do? How do you start that, and how do you do it?
So I guess I'll reverse engineer it. So we look for teams either to invest in or to bring into our accelerator programs that have really different people involved. So the first thing I would say is look for people who are different from you. They could be a different generation, a different personality type. They could have a love for a different part of the business, but you don't need two of you. You need one of you, and then you need to get really clear about who's doing what and kind of which lane are you in. And that doesn't mean that, you know, like Lena doesn't advise me on how to be CEO, or I don't advise her on maybe a better way to teach that one concept. But when Lena says, I'm going to develop the module again because it didn't work, I say, great, sounds like you know what you're doing. Good luck, you know, and we stay in those lanes and we get deeper in that expertise. And I think if you don't have people on a team who are in love with different parts of the business, you just can't cover all the bases. It's really hard starting out because starting out, you're probably one, maybe two, three people. And you have to be good at everything. So I will say that a red flag for us is when we look at a team and we say, I'm going to make up an example. Can you convert that into, and everybody here is going to be like, of course I can. Can you convert that into InDesign? And if somebody says, oh, I don't use InDesign. Okay, but it would look a lot sharper. You need to. Yeah, I don't know. I just do PowerPoint. That's a red flag, because an entrepreneur, if you don't know how to do it, go learn enough to know whether you need to know how to do it. And you're probably going to get really good at Excel and InDesign and how you record webinars and all these pieces. But when it comes down to the team, there's somebody who also loves to write code. And you don't write code. You can do these, you know, so it's this sort of mix at the very, very, very beginning of everybody's doing everything, but some people are in love with this and other people are in love with that. The other piece, and probably the best advice I can give, is every week meet 10 new people. If you are not networking, you will never grow a business, period, end of story. There's a ton of research that talks about that. There's I mean, we see it, you know, if you can't reach out to 10 people today and say, can you help me grow my business? Because at the beginning, you're starting with nothing. And the one thing you have is your network. And one of the most powerful questions entrepreneurs can ask, because your team is not just who's getting paid, right? Your team is everybody around you, and how you engage that team is, could you introduce me to that person? Or would you mind if I used your name when I emailed them? That's one of the most powerful tools, are those questions that entrepreneurs can have to keep moving their network up and out.
That's brilliant. And it's one of the remarkable things about the moment right now is that there's so much openness to new connections and
Yes.
new ways of bridging relationships that may never have been possible in the past. And I think seizing that moment is a great thing to do right now. And so Lena, how does this play out on a team formation process? What are some of the things that you recommend to early stage startups to make sure they know their roles, that they have a good agreement amongst the founders or the original group that might be starting on the pathway? What should our audience make sure to do?
That they do have an agreement when the value of the company is zero. It's easiest then, that they do understand that they shouldn't have, all of them shouldn't have equal percentage, so they have 50-50 or that they have, and it sounds really boring, that they have everything in writing. That they have, that they don't bring in someone just because it's a friend or a family member, that they can really contribute skill-wise, but also function in a startup environment, like Alice just said. I mean, you can have an excellent skill set, but it only but you can only work in an established corporation, and it's fine, you know. Mm-hmm. And from time to time, when I look at investments and I see that they are bringing in team members from, you know, Fortune 500 companies, it doesn't convince me that that is the right person, especially not in the early stage. Mm-hmm. It's a completely, and maybe we will talk a little bit more about that, but the shift that happens when they go from the garage phase to the scaling phase, there's a lot of interesting things that happen in a company then, both for the founders and for the people that joins later. But to start with, having an agreement when the value is zero, and bringing in the right people with the right skill set and with the right attitude, that will take them a long way.
Well, perhaps that is a great way to start to talk about the question of scale and the way that both opens possibilities and also begins to narrow the structures and the models that teams need to work with to meet those requirements to scale. So, Alice, what do you think? What's the best way to understand scale as a creative entrepreneur?
I would say you need three things. One, a pain that a lot of people want to pay you to solve. And where then the second thing is the business model, either the unit economics or the way you break out the business model is such that it's throwing off a lot of money, and that it gets less expensive to run the business the more people paying you. And then the third thing is you have to ask yourself, is that where I want to go? Is that what I want to do? I think that there's an unfortunate obsession with scale right now in the entrepreneurship space. Growing up, my dad ran a small tool and die engineering firm. He always had 2 employees. And I remember coming home from college one summer, and my mom started an organization that at one point had 180 employees. And I remember saying to my dad, how come you don't ever grow your business? He's classic dad, because I don't like people. I don't want to have a bunch of people around me, right? But he was such a classic engineer. But he knew himself. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew how he wanted to go to work every day. He knew that he loved machine and design and CAD, and he didn't want to be in meeting rooms talking to people. You know, my mother at the end of her career talked about herself as chief greeter. She would go around, because she had 180 employees, and all she did was walk around and make sure everybody was feeling okay and kind of could do their job. So she knew, you know, and I think understanding that for yourself is so important, because there's no better or right way to do it. If you're moving toward raising financing and you want investors, you have to think about scale, because otherwise how would they make money on their money? But that's not the first question you ask, right? You start with, what's the pain? Are there a lot of people? How do I want to solve it? Who do I want to be in this system of solving this? Do I want to run a global corporation, or do I want to run a small local business that's working on this problem? That's how I think about scale. Lena, I don't know if we've ever really talked about it. We sort of speak the same language around it, but what would you say?
No, but I agree. I mean, most companies in the world, they don't employ a lot of people.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
They don't say that I need to scale. You know, they have a business, and it's a good way of earning a living. That's right. It. and that's fine.
Yep. Yeah.
I completely agree that the focus on scale and that relationship to investment world creates a lot of barriers that are limiting the types of creative businesses that might be possible.
Yeah.
So how do, in your opinion, how do you kind of create your own pathway for a type of business that meets the kind of expectations that you have as an individual? How do you start to really understand that? Because especially if you're coming as a creative, you might not be thinking about the operations side of what you do. How do you start to think about that in relationship with the problem you might be solving or the practice you might be offering to the world?
Lena, you want to take that?
I think that if I do understand your question correctly, it's the network. You know, you need to find people who you trust, of course, but also people that you know have done it, either themselves or as advisor, mentors, coaches, you name it. But I really want anyone who is thinking about starting a company, to be picky about who you are giving, who you are taking advice from. Because again, we're back to the Fortune 500. It's different. That's not how it works. I mean, I'm working with an entrepreneur right now who told me, and she is just in the middle of launching her first beta version of the product. I'm pretty sure she's going actually to be successful. And she had asked for the advice from people, trusted people, and they had told her that, oh yeah, so you need a warehouse, you need janitors, and what will you do about with unions? And she was so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
When I said, you know, why don't you use your garage as a storage space, or, you know, kind of, you have to be your own janitor. You know, it's because small companies are not the same thing as big companies, just smaller. It's different.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is important to keep in the back of your head for any entrepreneur. But the other thing is that trust your judgment, you know, use common sense, and that will take you a long way. Together with do a cash flow.
Yeah.
Because then you will realize, oh, I can't afford this, you know, a warehouse or janitors. I need to fix this in a different way.
Yeah, I think, Lena, you nailed it. I was thinking mentors, get really good mentors. Because if you don't know which way to go, and don't decide up front. It's funny, I used to say to myself, oh, I hate managing people. I don't want to manage people. And it's become something that I really love, partly because I love our whole team. And so I just love working with them and engaging with them. But I also find that it's a challenging part for me. And so as I've learned to do a lot of other stuff, it's still an area where I personally can grow. And so don't shut those areas of personal or professional development off for yourself just because right now you're not into it. You might be into it. And I just want to echo what Lena said. We see a lot of creatives, especially who come to us and say, okay, so I think this should be a nonprofit, right? Because I met with so-and-so and they said, because we're an arts business, we should actually be a nonprofit. And I was like, what does being an arts business have to do with your IRS status? Nothing, right? It's about your business model. Who are your customers? Who are your customers? And I just, you know, and I feel like we spend an inordinate amount of time sort of chucking out the old junk mythology about who creatives are and how they should grow companies that is doing none of us any good. We hear a lot of, well, I guess I'll be, you know, sort of an independent consultant or an LLC. And, you know, it depends. If you pick a structure that is for a small business, you're going to be in a tight spot if you realize you want to grow a growth company 3 years down the road, right? So be careful who you get your advice from, and find people who have actually built startups. It's sort of like, you know, don't take advice on how to ride a horse from somebody who doesn't own a horse. It's sort of, you know, unpack it to a level that simple. Just because you work at IBM doesn't mean you know anything about starting a design shop, right? So look for people who have actually had a very similar experience and say, okay, they've lived through it. And they might only have 10 employees, but I guarantee you, if they have run a company for 10 years with 10 employees, they know a lot. They know a lot. Yeah.
Well, and I guess that leads to my last question before the Q&A, which is, if you're trying to raise money and you're going down the path that, for better or worse, the Silicon Valley model has created, and you keep on running into a no, or come back with more, or why would I invest in a company started by an artist? How do you not let that be the end of your road? And how do you find a way around? Where do you look?
I'll take that.
Did you mean, yeah.
So for 10 years, we've been pioneering the creative economy. We've been growing resources and a network, a new language, and a sense of what's possible. And yet, capital for creatives is still stuck in the dark ages. It is literally still patronage, by and large. And that is eroding our ability to be truly creative and embrace, as I talked about, that full kaleidoscope of humanity. So we have launched Da Vinci Ventures, which will be a venture capital firm that takes equity, maybe does revenue share, but has an expectation from the get-go that creatives can and do build very large-scale companies that make money for investors. On top of that, we're looking for companies that align with our values. So I think where people come up against the limitations, I guess, of the financing instruments that Silicon Valley uses, or that private equity in general uses, is that, again, their value is that single bottom line, right? How much money did we make? And I would encourage you to look for investors who have a multiple bottom line outcome. In other words, you want to look for investors who share your values around environmental sustainability. Yes, I want to grow a growth company, but I want to make sure that we're sourcing our products and our supply chain in a sustainable fashion. If you're talking to investors who are not aligned with your values, you're never going to get an investment, because you're not going to sell your soul. And they're kind of saying you got to be willing to sell your soul so you make X amount of money. So you're just not gonna. I'll let Lena talk a little bit about the business model, because we do see the project-based mentality stifle sort of the ability to envision growth.
Yes, we do. And because unfortunately there are, and that is really a sad, it's sad that so many entrepreneurs. I had a conversation just earlier today with an entrepreneur who has raised a lot of money, and she said, I will never ever do it again. Never ever. Mm-hmm. And I think that is sad, because there are so many advantages that VCs can give to companies. I mean, they have they have the expertise, they have a lot of experience, they have a network that they could put it to good use for entrepreneurs. But my firm conviction is that you should not, any entrepreneur, it doesn't matter if you're social looking for impact money, if you're high tech, or if you're creative entrepreneur, the first source of money, the first thing that you think about, that should be someone needs to write me a check. You know, and of course I do understand fully that that an entrepreneur doesn't have a lot of money saved that they can utilize. But I would say that before you take any money from anyone again, and you have a line painkiller customers, you should really look into what is it that I can do to innovate in my business model. So in the first phase, how can I get my customers to pay a little bit earlier, or, you know, some smaller amount, whatever it is. It's so very different depending on what company it is. And the other one is to innovate in how you acquire customers. So that you start with, what is it that I can do with what I already have and my resources to grow my company a little bit more before I ask for external funding. Because if for no other reason is that if you grow your company a little bit more, the value that you will decide on together with external investors are going to be higher. So you might, you don't have to give up as much shares as if you raised earlier. The other thing I really want to echo what Alice is saying, that you should really ask any external investor that you bring together with any board member, anyone, about their values, and make sure that they are aligned with your own values. First of all, because of internal reasons, because otherwise you will end up in a lot of really boring discussions about things that, you know, yeah, that was a not very nice way of saying.
Why are we talking about this?
But yeah. The other thing, and we can see a little bit about that right now, is that customers are starting paying attention, and I love it. You know, who has backed your company? And if that is backed by someone that they don't trust, they're going to walk away and not buy from you. So that's a responsibility for all entrepreneurs. But again, it starts with innovate, find out painkiller customers, and innovate in customer acquisition and business model. Go and look at how entrepreneurs are doing it in completely different market spaces than where you are, and say, how can I adapt or adopt or copy or whatever how they are doing it so it works for my business. Sorry, that was a long answer.
That's brilliant though. And it's a perfect transition into our questions from the audience. And I'll try to go through them in order that they arrived. So first question is, thank you for the wonderful advice, Alice and Lena, thank you. Can you expand a little more on how we can demonstrate willingness to pay at an early stage with credibility? I'm not 100% sure I understand that question. Can you expand a little more on how we can demonstrate willingness, and this is in quotes, willingness to pay at an early stage with credibility?
Can I point out, Robbie, there were a lot of questions in the chat that folks might want to move into the Q&A.
Yes, and please do that.
So we don't miss them.
So maybe we need to move past that one because I'm not 100% sure. And if that person would like to
No, I think we get it. I think Lena and I get it. So willingness to pay, Lena talked about, you need to find a lot of people who are willing to pay. And so I think what the question is how can you demonstrate that? Lena and I sort of reject outright the freemium model. You know, it's not a great way to get started. We had a company come through one of the accelerators years ago who had 1 million downloads and couldn't convert to earn a single dollar once he put a 99-cent value on the app. So it doesn't really tell you about your business model. I guess I would say look for competitors. Are people paying to solve that in a similar way? Or are they paying to solve it with a completely different kind of product, right? So when bottled water came out, people were all paying for sodas, but people wanted healthier options. So they were solving the pain with soda, but they were more than happy to pay $2 for a bottle of water. So look to see how, again, if you're highly identified with the pain, then see how are people solving that pain right now. And it might be with a completely different thing that what you're proposing.
I'm going to put something here in the chat that this is an article in HBR called An Anthropologist Walks into a Bar.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because I am not a great believer in sending out surveys and ask people, you know, if I started selling bottled waters in train stations, would you buy from me? Yeah, and people say, yeah, of course. And then your second question, would you pay $1, $5, or $10? And they would say 10, most of them. And then your conclusion would be that, okay, I can start selling bottled water in train stations. No, you can't. You cannot really do that, because there is, you know, what people say in a survey doesn't count for anything. But instead, if you go to a train station and you watch people and you see what the alternatives are, or, you know, if people look thirsty, you have much more solid evidence for that there is actually a market gap in a train station for bottled water. The other thing, and that is not the question, but I just want to touch upon this. I know, I come from the high-tech world, and I was, thanks to Alice, brought into the world of creative entrepreneurs. I know, after all the companies that we have worked with, that creatives have so much potential offering new solutions to existing problems. But I don't want you to, I make a distinction between 3 different types of market opportunities. One is that you can be an outperformer in an existing market. That is, you can start selling bottled water, but you have a little bit more bubbles in it or something. I don't want creative entrepreneurs to kind of say that's where we should be, guys. I want you to disrupt, and I'm using Clayton Christensen's vocabulary here, and because I just love it. I want you to disrupt existing markets. I want you to pay attention to pains out there, as Alice said, the big ones, the small ones, the local one, the global one, you know. And because you have such a tremendous, interesting brain and connection and tools at hand, so you can change how we think about the value creation in existing markets. You can remove things, you can add things, but so that's where I want to meet you. I also want to meet you in the create totally new market spaces. Yeah. Invent new market spaces. use the, it would be tremendously interesting to see what all of you could do with virtual reality. First of all, if you can make it look less ugly, I would very much appreciate it. But do you see? So I kind of begging you for go out there and disrupt and create market spaces. Not, I want you to scale, even if I do understand that maybe you don't want to scale, but I don't want you to just leave it and say, no, I'm going to set up a studio and we will work on helping companies to think about emotional intelligence or something. I want you to be different because you have the capacity to be different. Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't the question. It was just an answer.
That's perfect. So another question here, and I think we touched on this a little bit, but it's good to revisit. How can we deal with the skepticism when looking for partners? A challenge for creative entrepreneurs is the fact that we are dealing with intangibles, opposed to enterprises that are often dealing with physical products and services.
Sorry, I'm looking for the question so I can read it. And
it is question from Eli.
Hi, Eli. From Eli Samba. Partners.
So
yeah. We see that a lot. I'll share a quote from Vince Kudlubik, is one of the founders of Meow Wolf, and they came through our accelerator and we were their first investor. And Vince said to me, the gift you gave me is you believed in me. And I laughed and I said, I didn't even know what you were talking about, frankly. Because they foresaw a world that nobody could describe, right? If people don't want to believe in you, walk away. Don't waste your time. First of all, there is a world of us now who do believe in you. So don't waste your time trying to convert the unbelievers. Go find your tribe. They're out there. There's an online group called Coffee and Creatives, 3,000 strong. I think they're on Facebook. They do Facebook Live. They do this and that. There's creative mornings. There's creative startups. Find your tribe and stick with your tribe, because I think it's exhausting to your soul, if not your body, to continually get this corrosive sort of, but aren't you an artist? Oh, Lord Almighty, We intentionally picked the name Da Vinci Ventures to refute the idea that people are one thing, right? Because he was sort of the best known, yes, engineer, yes, financier, yes, artist, yes, mathematician, yes. And that potential is what we see. And if people don't see that in you right off the bat, don't waste your time. And if you're looking for particular kinds of people, ask us. I saw a different question. Who do I take my business plan to, or my business model to? Us. Alice at Creative Startups, Lena at Creative Startups. Just do it, right? Just go, hey, Alice, do you know anybody who? Probably, yeah, sure, I'd love to make an intro, yeah. But skip all the non-believers. I hear more and more 50-year-old women who are like, fuck the non-believers, I don't care, I'm done with it. I'm so there, right? So just, yeah. Sorry for the language.
No problem. So this is a question from Roger, and we've covered some of the other ones at the start. So he asks, I'll read it out here. Intellectual property is a very important factor to starting an entrepreneurial company.
Yeah.
So how do you protect your idea worldwide without exponential cost in an environment where other countries might not protect your idea? So how do you deal with that global intellectual property issue?
Yeah, Lena's saying, do I have to say it out loud? There is no way to protect your intellectual property globally. There is no way. It's brand. Brand is everything now. And if you don't have a brand that allows you to refute, you know, and go on Instagram and say, don't be fooled by knockoffs. I mean, there's really, unfortunately, nothing you can do. It's the flip side of the global creative economy. Everybody is subject to it. So I would guess that Lena would be able to help think through some ideas around staying ahead of the curve, because that's really the solution. Brand and staying ahead of the curve.
And you know, it's in the brand. It's in the emotional connections that you constantly have to work on, you know, strengthening with your customers, so that they will never ever go for another brand. You know, the ambition for whatever, how big or small, wherever your company is, that your customers are your die-hard fans.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you make a mistake, or if you launch a product, a solution that is not top notch, they will not leave you ever. That's the attitude, because other companies will try to steal your product, but your company is not your product. Your company is so much more than just that. And I mean, we are seeing large corporations who are now putting all the patents in public domain and saying, and you know, there is so much need for in the market space where we are. So, you know, if you can help us, come and do it. Mm-hmm. You know, you can use what we have already discovered.
Yeah. I think
and if I can add to that, can I show a book? I don't know if you can see.
There it is.
Have you seen it? It's The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And you know, it's and it's not like he's giving me a percentage for every book that he sells, but wherever I go now, I show it, because it's such a wonderful book. And I'm sure that there are some of you who have yes, Erna, it's your Bible. It's such an amazing book, because what he says is that you have to understand that your business it's an infinite game that you are playing, that you are in. It's not, you know, the most success is not who is going to make the most revenue in the next quarter. You have to find your cause that you share, that you can share with other companies, and that's fine with that. And you know, and I think it's just to face the brutal facts. No, you can never find a way to protect your product. But Roger, there is so much more that you can do with your company, so that you know, you don't care about the competition. There, you know, there is competition, but you don't care about it. And if you want to discuss it more with me, Roger, you need more convincing argument, just lena@creativestartups.org.
So trying to cover all of these here, and I think that this question contains a whole bunch of strands that we can cover. So Esther asks, I run a women's empowerment group that has been free for years, but now I think it's time to charge for events and conferences. How do you think I can go down this lane?
I would start with something very light and reasonably priced, and name it as that we're testing this. Let people know. How many people, Esther, in the group? Is it national, local? Are you starting with an audience of 10 or 1,000?
Let's see if Esther gets us there.
Well, I think I would start with something
50.
50, great. So I would start with something and set the goal of 5 people pay you And whether the right price is $4.99 a month for 3 months, or I don't know. But let them know ahead of time and encourage them to help you build the product. So that because what will happen is that the 5 who come to you are the people who really want to be engaged and involved and have some ideas around how you guys could help meet a pain, and you need them on your team, right? So your very, very first customers aren't really customers. They're more like your first team members. And you have to kind of think of them that way because they want to be that involved, which can feel a little annoying, but they graced you with early dollars. And so they earned that, frankly. And your first customers, they want to get more involved than just buying. So figure out, what you're going to offer and say, this is my offering, but I'm inviting 5. So just 5, let me know by Friday. So don't, no begging ever, right? Cut off. It's exclusive. Join or don't join. And here's what I'm going to need from those customers: $5 a month, and join a weekly meeting on how we improve it, and da-da-da. And then they also become your evangelists.
If I can add to that, just two suggestions: ask for donations to start with.
That's true, to figure out the price.
Yeah. And the other one is frame it as something new.
Mm-hmm.
Call your conference something else. Include something that hasn't been included before. It could be a different type of speakers, could be a book signing event, could be, so that it's a new thing. You are not
Yes.
starting charging for something that has been for free forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great advice as well. So this is a rather conceptual question, but I like it because I know it's something that creatives encounter all the time. So the question is, if you have a great big idea, but feel encumbered by roadblocks, for example, not knowing how to take the next step and get started, and that these roadblocks continue to prevent you from starting on your big idea, what advice do you have for getting around those?
Lena?
So I would say it depends on the what are the roadblocks, because the roadblocks could be either those first 3 things that you need to align, or it could be execution. So in order to give a better advice, it would be interesting to know a little bit more. I would be happy to help. But overall, I think that roadblocks overall, if you break it up to smaller pieces, it's easier to overcome those roadblocks. The other thing is ask for help, or at least ask for input. If you tell someone else about the roadblock, they might say, that's not really a roadblock, that's an opportunity. Or I faced the same thing, this is how I did it. Because I think that, and this is something that also is a piece of advice. Many entrepreneurs ask me, oh, I have a great idea, but I don't want to talk about it. Someone can steal it or something. But that is what I usually say, is that if it's so easy so that you talk to others about your idea, and after 20 minutes they know how to do it, and they go ahead and do it themselves, then it's probably not a good business idea. Then you said, thank you so much for doing it, because now I've decided that I will not do it. But most people they really want to help, especially in the entrepreneur community. People want to help.
It's true.
So ask for help.
Mm-hmm. Can I add to that and just say, I think the most untalked about roadblock for creatives and all entrepreneurs is the doubts in our own heads. And I think during this last 3 or 4 months, it has been like a disease, at least in my head. It is just a constant battle to feel energized and to feel like results are happening. Creative startups, we pride ourselves on really having a positive impact on every entrepreneur we work with. I haven't even seen an entrepreneur in 4 months except on Zoom. It's, you know, this is like the Olympics of mental superpowering through and feeling like you can get there. So if the roadblocks are like some of mine these days, mental and just, you know, my spirit is flagging, I'm scared, I don't know how to do this, I can't imagine myself being that person, whatever those voices are in your head, tell someone. I approached a woman recently who's a very successful venture capitalist. And I said, will you please mentor me? Because I just don't know which step is next. And my normal ways of figuring it out are closed because of COVID. So figure it out through other people, and just have that self-awareness. And, you know, if you meditate, try and use meditation to say, okay, the running voice in my head saying I can't do this is just a running voice. I'm going to put it on the shelf, whatever tools you have. But I feel like that's something we don't talk about enough. And the global we in the entrepreneurship community, and just sort of accept it as like, we're all struggling with this.
So I suppose that, and it's hard to leave only one last question, but I want to end on a really optimistic note and hear your thoughts on what would inspire you as entrepreneurs working in the space we are now. So knowing that the global pandemic has not gone away, knowing that we are in these little boxes, connecting with each other remotely, where would you focus and how would you start to work in that remote way as a business?
Well, we have turned our attention to, and I saw another question in here that I want to talk to a little bit, that was about if you're in a sector that has been hit really hard. So Da Vinci Ventures is focused on the immersive and experience economy. Most of the companies that we've had great success with over the last 5 or 6 years have been, you know, Meow Wolf, Native Realities, Embodied Labs, Mixtros. So these are companies that are experience companies, and they have been hit so hard. And we believe in that opportunity. We know it's coming back. We know that consumers want meaningful experiences, and we know that it is the right way to build a more sustainable economy where lots of crazy fun voices are included. So we're not wavering, but we have had to adapt what we're doing. So we're working right now to identify what we're calling our Da Vinci 5, a portfolio of 5 companies that we're working with at a distance, because I think distance work is totally feasible, and guiding those companies to get through this period. And I think the worst thing that anybody could do is to sit still and wait. That will be the death of you. If you wait on the sidelines, not only are there people like us who are not waiting, right? But you lose that sort of chutzpah, that juice, and you're not connecting with people who can feed that creative energy and that dynamism of your heart and soul. You have to stay fed. So I set the goal of meeting 100 new people by September, and I'm halfway there, and I spend lots of time on LinkedIn and Zoom. And that's one of the sort of very concrete tools and disciplines I built for myself to pull myself forward through this time of, the world is kind of amok. I don't know if that answers the question, but I don't stand still. Do not stand still. Most entrepreneurs who are indecisive lose. The entrepreneurs who make decisions and then quickly say, that was the wrong decision, we definitely should go the other way, they're the ones who win. Yeah.
And we're reaching the end of our allotted 90 minutes. Lena, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
No,
and Alice, that goes for you as well.
I rest my case by saying I want to I want to hear from you, and I want us to talk about how you can disrupt existing markets and how you can create new market spaces, because I know that you can. Mm-hmm. I am so convinced. So,
well, thank you both. It's been another incredible webinar for us, and to have your candid advice and experience and a conversation with our attendees here from all over the world is makes us really proud at Art Center to be able to convene this. And we want to do more. So of course we'll stay connected. Our doors are open, and I just want to share with attendees that we will, despite what Lena said about surveys, we will send you a survey. And we really appreciate your feedback. I know that we have a lot of feedback from existing webinars, and we're building that into our next series of Bold webinars. So everything that you're sharing is going into our strategy and into our programmatic design. And even if you haven't quite seen that yet, stay tuned. So with that, I'll wrap everything up, and we will include a link to this if you'd like to refer again on the video on our YouTube channel. And you know where to find Lena and Alice. And I wish we could give them a round of applause, but we will conclude, as every Zoom meeting does, with a sort of quick end. So thank you.
Thanks.
Keep in touch.
Thanks for sticking with us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.